Hello everyone, and welcome to Right Wing Rising. Please be sure to like this video down below before you are finished watching, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So the state of focus in today's installment of my 240 to Win series is the state of Kansas. And it's a place that does not get talked about enough, but needs to be analyzed ahead of this upcoming election, because it has been trending to the left consistently as of late to a very concerning degree, raising questions about the political direction and Republicans' chances in the state in the coming election cycles. It has been a Republican state for the past 60 years at the presidential level. Bush even won it by 21 points, then cleared 60% and got 62 points in 2004, and won by 25. An absolute landslide victory. It did swing 10 points to the left in 2008 when Obama lost to McCain by 15, but Romney won by 22 points in 2012 and got just below 60% of the vote, so almost making the state just as red as it was in 2004. Trump got a few points less of the vote share in 2016 than Romney did, getting 56% of the vote and claiming a 20-point victory over Hillary Clinton in the state. But the national popular vote got 2 points redder from 2012 to 2016, yet Kansas got 2 points bluer, meaning that it trended to the left. Then Biden got the state within 15 points, Trump being stuck at 56%, and Biden cracking 40%, getting all the way up to 41.5 points in the state, which meant that Kansas swung to the left by double the amount that the country as a whole did in 2020. Making it the second straight cycle that the state trended to the left compared to the country. This phenomenon was not just seen at the presidential level either. In the 2014 U.S. Senate election that took place in Kansas, Republicans only won by 10 points, despite it being a very big red wave year for the GOP nationwide. And this race also featured a Republican incumbent senator that had consistently gotten over 60% of the vote in previous elections. This incumbent retired and did not run for re-election in 2020, and current Senator Roger Marshall won by only about 11 points, and only receiving 53% of the vote in that election, a very close election for what many people consider to be a reliably Republican state. The other Senate seat was up in 2022, and the incumbent Jerry Moran actually got a decreased margin of victory compared to his win in 2016, despite it being a Republican favorable year this past midterm. And he got over 100,000 less votes than he did in 2016, while Democrats' vote total stayed consistent from 6 years prior. It was still a comfortable victory, but another example of a trend of election results where Republicans' margin of victory is slimming. You can't call it a solid red state if conservatives and Republicans are struggling to get in the high 50s and crack 60% in the state consistently like they used to. And the past two governor races were lost by Republicans. The current incumbent governor is a Democrat, and a very openly liberal one at that. She'll play the usual game that a Democrat in a red state does, of walking and talking like a moderate, but her policies are very openly and unapologetically liberal. She won by 5 points in 2018 and held on by 2 points and only 20,000 votes in 2022. Many people thought it was a foregone conclusion that Republicans would at least flip back the governorship in Kansas, but they couldn't do that. So no matter how close the margin was, it was a shocking result that set alarm bells off for conservatives about the political direction of the state. And even further, there was a ballot referendum regarding abortion that took place earlier that year in 2022 during the August primaries. And the state even voted liberally in that election, defeating a pro-life ballot measure by a 59 to 41 margin that would have removed the right to an abortion in the state constitution. It was not the best worded amendment. The Republican legislature dropped the ball on that, and it was less than 2 months after Roe v. Wade was overturned, so it received much more national attention, being the first abortion or pro-life referendum that was being voted on since that court decision, but it was still shocking by how resoundingly it was rejected in a supposedly red state. The root of the problem causing the shift to the left in the state of Kansas in recent election cycles can be found, as usual, in the urban city areas. The counties of Douglas and Johnson make up the majority of the Kansas side of the Kansas City, Missouri metro area, a city in Missouri that is smack dab right on the border between Missouri and Kansas. So the metro area naturally spills into the eastern portion of Kansas, and this area in the state is growing rapidly. The suburbs in that surrounding area moved left in 2020 to a significant degree. In this same region, the capital city of Kansas, that being Topeka, is located in a swing county that was won by Trump in 2016, but swung away from him in 2020 and he lost it. But the rest of the state is mostly rural farmland that votes very, very Republican. Wichita, which is the largest city in Kansas and also a major college town, actually votes red. 90% of the state is farmland, with over 50,000 farms within its borders, averaging almost 800 acres per farm. And 3/4 of the state population is Christian, 3/4 of the state population is white. So these are all very favorable demographics as a whole to Republicans. But it's one of the least densely populated states, and the rurals are shrinking. So if the population continues to get more and more concentrated in the city areas, the voter base in the state will continue to get more unbalanced towards the Democrats and more unfavorable toward Republicans. There is no real consensus for the reason behind the shrinkage of the population in the rural areas. However, it is in the state's best interest that this population trend gets reversed or at least slows down, because even today, agriculture is still a main industry in Kansas. The state exported almost $5 billion in agricultural products in 2023, and they are a lead producer among all of the states in commercial cattle, corn, and wheat. So both political parties in Kansas are trying to come up with solutions to this problem, since eventually the lower population in the rural and farming areas will start to massively hurt their agricultural industry, and therefore the state economy. Obviously, the rural areas gaining population, or at least slowing the bleeding in the decline in that area, will benefit Republicans electorally in the state, as those voters are not favorable to Democrats by and large, but still, both parties are trying to put out their best solution for this problem, since it hurts the state overall. And therefore, the Democrat governor really has no choice but to try and address it. Republicans' proposal to deal with the rural exodus in the state of Kansas is cutting taxes, slashing regulations, and overall pursue an agenda that will lower the cost of living in the state, and particularly for those living in farming communities. Now, what is the Democrats' counter proposal to that, you might ask? Well, Governor Laura Kelly blames people leaving the state, particularly from the rural areas, on anti-trans bills that Republicans have passed in the legislature. I kid you not. She blames people leaving the state because people don't want to live in a state where kids can't have sex change surgeries or be put on hormones that will transition them to be the opposite gender. And obviously, as you can tell from this common sense point that the Kansas governor is making, the Democratic Party is very serious and very sane nowadays. They have not at all gone off the complete deep end of the political, logical, and moral spectrum. With people like this running the state of Kansas, and with Kamala Harris being at the top of the Democratic ticket this fall, who shares all of Laura Kelly's policy proposals and then some, I really think there's a chance for Donald Trump to improve in the state when this is the opposition he's running against, because he stands in contrast to them in almost every single way. Biden flipped Johnson, Riley, and Shawnee counties in the state of Kansas in 2020, and those same counties all turned blue at the Senate level that year. But with the national popular vote all but certain to become more Republican this fall, by more than a few points compared to 4 years ago, It will be telling to see if Kansas moves to the right with the country as well, and if so, by how much. Trump's path to expanding his margin in the state is flipping back the counties of Riley and Shawnee into his column, improving his rural margins across the state, his vote total in the suburban areas, particularly in the eastern side of the state, and narrowing Harris's margin of victory in the Kansas City metro area in the counties of Douglas and Johnson. This is a formula he is looking to replicate in battleground states, improving the suburbs and swing areas, maxing out the rural vote, and narrowing his loss in the cities. And if he can do that here, look for him to get closer to 58 or 59%, maybe even crossing 60% on a good night, compared to only 56% in 2020. If the state moves to the right of the country, or in line with it, that could be a sign that the leftward trend of the state is slowing down. But if it gets worse for Republicans, say it moves to the left compared to the country, perhaps it moves less to the right than the country as a whole, or Trump only wins it by about what he won it in 2020, then that would mean Kansas will continue trending to the left. And if that happens, the GOP will really have to start worrying about this state electorally in the very near future. And down ballot, Republicans are relying on Trump to do very, very well and dominate Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, given that Democrats have been making inroads in the state in recent years. We've talked about the Democrat gains at the presidential level, Senate level, and the governor level, of course, but Republicans only won the popular vote here at the House level in 2018 by just 10 points, which is still a comfortable win, but a far cry from what Republicans normally win this state by. Democrats won their first congressional seat in 10 years in 2018, with the 3rd congressional district flipping blue by 10 points to the now current incumbent representative, Democrat Sharice Davids. And this was mostly due to the fact that this House seat is based in the Kansas City metro area, and Johnson County is a part of that district. This area re-elected Davids to Congress by 10 points once again in 2020 and by 12 points in 2022, despite it getting redder in redistricting due to more rural counties being added to the district. This is not a House election that is on the radar of many election pundits as a competitive race, but it could be surprisingly close. Trump only lost this district by 4.5 points in 2020. And assuming he improves in the state and narrows Harris's margin in this urban area of the state, he could lose it by even less, or maybe even barely win it, all of which would drive up the turnout in the encompassed counties for the Republican challenger to Davids, who has also fundraised very well, almost $1.5 million for this one single race, keeping up with the millions that the incumbent has raked in. And Republicans in the primary combined for 50,000 votes, while Sharice Davids got less than 40,000, which is not everything because you can't translate the primary to the general election perfectly all the time, but it still gauges conservative enthusiasm in this area of Kansas. So Trump improving in Kansas, especially in the eastern, more urban area, could put this House seat back in play. The other House race to watch in Kansas can be found in the neighboring 2nd Congressional District, which almost flipped blue as well in 2018, with it going red by a single point. Again, the leftward trend of the state made this happen, but it was also helped further by the fact that the incumbent, Steve Watkins, was being plagued by scandals and controversies. During the 2020 primary cycle, he lost renomination to Jake LaTurner, who turned around and won this district by 15 points in 2020 and repeated that margin in 2022. Now, LaTurner himself is not running for re-election and is being replaced by the very solidly conservative former Attorney General of Kansas, Derek Schmidt. He narrowly lost to Laura Kelly in the 2022 governor election. He was the Republican nominee for that race in the midterms. But now he is making a political comeback to run for Congress. He had to win a competitive primary, so he will have to unite the Republican voters in this seat ahead of the general election. But Democrats also had a very closely contested primary, and Republicans got more than double the total votes that Democrats got. Trump also won this district by 16 points. So you might be wondering why I'm even taking the time to mention it, but I am doing that because this district is also part of the Kansas City metro area. And on net, it is still a majority urban and suburban House seat. So Democrats could be competitive here, especially with no incumbent. But if Republicans win big here, by about 15 points or more, it will be a very good sign for conservatives in the state. Lastly, the final elections that we need to look at in Kansas are that for the state legislature. Republicans hold supermajorities in both chambers, with a 29-11 advantage in the state Senate and an 85-40 advantage in the state House. And it is crucial for Republicans to keep these supermajorities in the legislature because they have a huge impact in a state where the governor is a Democrat. It allows Republicans to override Laura Kelly when she vetoes conservative legislation that they pass out of the state legislature, giving them the ability to get around her and pass good bills into law. They are likely to hold on to their sizable majority in the state Senate. Democrats would need to pick up 3 state Senate seats to break the Republicans' supermajority there, which they do not have a strong path to do, since both parties have 2 seats each that they are likely to pick up, with Republicans only having to defend 3 somewhat competitive seats. So Democrats would have to win all 3 to achieve their goal, and that's just not likely. Republicans have a more tenuous grip on the state House, with Democrats only having to flip 2 seats there to break the Republicans' majority in that branch, which is a lot more feasible mathematically since there are 125 House seats compared to just 40 Senate seats. But if Trump does well at the top of the ticket, Republicans could not just hold on to their supermajority, they could actually expand it, as there are about 5 to 7 Democrat-held House seats that are prime for Republicans to pick up. That being said, Republicans are defending about 10 of their own seats that are pretty competitive, with Democrats heavily targeting them, because breaking the Republicans' iron grip on the state legislature is the Democrats' sole focus in the state this year. But the good thing for Republicans is even though that these 10 are the most competitive that they have to hold on to, the majority of them still have a Republican lean. The Republican state party in Kansas needs to make this their focus as well, just like the Democrats are, to make sure they take advantage of Trump being at the top of the ticket and driving up turnout, to not just hold their supermajority, but to actually pad it by a few House seats, to make their margin for error in overriding Laura Kelly's vetoes more than just 1 to 2 seats. In the last decade, Democrats have become more emboldened and have performed better electorally in the state of Kansas. While this trend to the left has been consistent, not enough time has passed in the big scheme of things to see if this will continue into the future. And this is a key election to see if that trend will slow down and possibly even reverse back toward Republicans, to give them a better chance to hold on to the state long into the future. And just like in most states, as usual, a lot of this comes down to Donald Trump and how he does in the state this election. If he improves on his performance in 2020 by a couple points and is able to get the suburban and urban areas of Kansas to vote a little less blue, while at the same time turning the rural and swing areas of the state ruby red, then Trump will not just have another feather in his cap on election night, another state in his column, another landslide win in a state that has historically gone Republican for a number of years, but he also will have the effect of opening the door for Republicans to have the chance to take all 4 House seats and to protect and possibly even expand on the supermajorities that they have in the state legislature, which would be very underrated victories in the grand scheme of things, especially in a year such as this, when everything is riding on the presidential election. That's where all eyes and attention is focused on. But down-ballot victories for Republicans, instigated by a good performance and a good night in the state from Donald Trump, would go a long way in giving Republicans the advantages that they need and could use to push back against the Democrat and liberal advances in recent years, and most importantly, to make the fake moderate, liberal Democratic governor, Laura Kelly, a complete lame duck governor in the last 2 years of her term.